Hi, everyone. This is the Fractional CAO. I'm Mark Basinski. I don't know if you saw it this week. It was pretty amusing. Frank Slootman, the CEO of Snowflake, he's up on the stage for their big annual event, announcing the new stuff. Turned out to be some NVIDIA partnerships and stuff. But anyway, he starts out by saying, we're going to play a little drinking game. Every time I say AI, you have to do a shot. It's like I couldn't think of a better metaphor for just the relentless hype that we have in the market right now for analytics generally and AI, specifically. And it's almost like the mountain of hype from media, from the Gartners of the world. It's like if you're not doing transformative analytics in your company now, and you're not investing in AI, right now, there's like something wrong with you. And I think it's a very unfortunate, scenario in the sense is it leaves the mere mortals, the companies that aren't named Google and aren't named, Apple, in a feeling of like, well, hang on, we feel like we're a bit left behind. What are we doing wrong? Right? I don't feel like we're transformative here at our company. We spend a lot of money, or maybe some money, at least, on analytics. And, we've got people that do Tableau reports, and, we've made an investment in putting data in something like SQL Server or maybe Snowflake, who knows? But at the end of the day, we still, when I say we, the leadership of these companies, right, we still have very much the same set of challenges that we've had for, it seems like, forever, right? We're still perplexed with revenue acceleration. We still have a harder time than we'd like optimizing our customer retention. When we go after new pieces of business, we argue about what the optimum price needs to be, right? There's no good cost accounting standards in terms of how we approach that and optimizing the way we go to market. At some level, I feel like CEOs and CFOs, the senior leadership in these companies, right, they just have this sense of disappointment or at least confusion. It's like, well, hey, hang on, I thought we spent money on all this stuff. And when I look at that a step deeper, it's in many cases because the investment is kind of shoehorned over into the IT department. So there you go, Ms. or Mr. CIO, have fun with that. While you're effectively running the company for us, while you're dealing with security, while you're dealing with regulatory compliance, in your weekend, warrior job or in your moonlighting job, can you also run an analytics practice? And I think it's a bit unfair in that scenario, in the sense that it just gets grouped in with everything else, right? I think the answer, certainly that I would advocate, is specialized leadership, competent and experienced resources, and targeted investments for unambiguous returns as measured by the business people, right? And that's not just, hey, let's have the IT people pick this up as a side gig. It's targeted, it's specialized, and it's it's something that has to go after unambiguous returns in the business sense. Now, when I think of that targeted leadership, there's a couple ways I think the marketplace thinks about it. The first is classic data leadership. The phrase is the chief data officer, or CDO, is, I would say almost an accepted role, right? People understand what that is. And, these people come into a company and they're accountable for the availability of the data, the accuracy of the data, the quality of the data. And if you've got data engineers that are writing SQL or working with tools that generate SQL, building tables, that kind of stuff, they probably work for the CDO in some way. And I can almost see, when you think of it as a technical problem, how senior leadership would say, well, that sounds like IT stuff, right? Let's let the IT folks deal with that because it's technical computer kind of stuff. Okay, maybe, but it's still different and targeted in its own way. But I think it's worse than that. I think there's a role called the Chief Analytics Officer, very specifically using the word analytics differentiated from data, CAO in this example, where you're not so much focused on mining data and building tables. You're focused on utilizing the data to drive the very business outcomes that the senior leadership of the company is so hungry for, right? So how do we unleash the power of data? How do we have an effect from the data that is well aligned with those same issues that senior leadership has: revenue acceleration, customer retention, optimizing the way we go to market in terms of our pricing strategy, all of that, right? So taking a step back then, I did a little Googling around, and it's like, well, out in the wild, how many companies actually have CDOs anyway? And it turns out, it probably won't surprise you, but the larger companies tend to be more aligned with these kind of roles, right? So there's a company called New Vantage Partners that's done research for probably the last 10 years. It's pretty widely published. You can find it, with a simple Google search. They did a press release on Business Wire, is how I found it. But essentially, this year's results, they've got 94 of the Fortune 1000 companies that they've interviewed. And of those 94, it turns out 77% have a CDO or the combo pack CDAO as leadership, right? So, but these are companies like, and I'll just read the list, right? CVS Health, United Health, ExxonMobil, Cigna, JP Morgan Chase, Fannie Mae, Bank of America, Citibank, Humana, MetLife, Freddie Bank, these kind of companies, right? So, and even there, it's only 77%. So you got, 23% of those huge companies that don't have one. So if you, the mere mortal company that's not one of those big, giant, big public companies, don't have a CDO, well, it's no wonder. Don't feel bad. But again, it's sort of worse than that, right? So continuing to build the thought, there's another article published by the MIT Sloan School. And they've got an article they put out, I think it was about November of last year. So not hot off the press, but just a few months old. And they said, well, if you are fortunate enough to have a chief data officer on your staff, the shelf life for this individual is probably only going to be about 2.5 years. In fact, it's only 18 months that they better show transformative change, or we're going to start having stress and they're probably going to be out within that 2.5 years, right? So you compare that to, say, a CIO or a CFO, the shelf life for these folks in a typical company is 4.5 years, right? So almost twice as long. So what is it about the CDO role that is so short-lived, right? And I think as you read the article and just put some common sense on top of it, right, it has to do with politics, some general pissing contests between organizations, lack of clarity when it comes to the deliverables, right? And I look at that and say, well, maybe it's because you don't have the CAO leadership, right? This intensity as it applies to how do I utilize the advantages of analytics for the business, as opposed to how much data can we get in a data warehouse and how many reports can we write, right? So my point of view is CAO is where the action is, right? You want to have transformative effect on your business. You want to have business-facing impact on your business. It's got to be through the chief analytics officer, right? So where does that leave us? Do you hire this CAO if you're a company not named Apple or or Google? Well, maybe, but one, they're hard to find. And two, you have to deal with what the Sloan School just says in terms of the shelf life and the politics. And it's hard sometimes to make changes from within an organization compared to from the outside. Which brings me to the point, right? I am a huge believer in the average company that doesn't have this sort of build out of chief analytics officer, chief data officer, to hire it from the outside. It's called a fractional CAO. It's a fractional chief analytics officer, right? So these folks can come in, hit the ground running with competency, with business orientation, and forget about 18 months to have a transformative effect. It's like 6 months, right? From the outside, that experienced CAO, fractional CAO, hitting the ground running can have an impact right off the bat within 6 months, right? So it's an outside voice. There's a sense of urgency. There's a competency, all applied to your direct business, right? So let's triage what your business issues and objectives are, and make sure they're aligned with what that fractional CAO and the organization that they bring can do. Now, fractional. We know what that means, right? We've had fractional law firms come into our companies forever, right? So we understand that. We don't necessarily have to have our own lawyers, our own counsel on staff. We can bring them in from the outside. We, in many cases, hire marketing agencies. Those are fractional resources. In some cases, we hire HR people, right? So there's a fractional VP of HR, or there's expertise to come in to help with benefits packages and comps and all that kind of stuff. So we understand fractional. But I don't think we as a market necessarily understand fractional as it applies to the analytics problem. The closest as I think we get is the fractional CDO that's camouflaged as the data engineering consulting firm, right? And those folks are very important for the problem, but don't necessarily drive the analytics strategy, that CAO role, right? So how do we get the CAO role into a company on a fractional basis? I don't know. Maybe it's a matter of education. Maybe it's a matter of just trying the suit on and getting on with it. And maybe it's a little bit better partnering with the CDOs out there that are doing a great job, right? So in that spirit, let me bring on the guest that I'd like to have on the show this week. His name is Kevin Marshbank, and he is a founder and the big cheese at a company called the Data Vault Shop. Kevin, hi. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
Yeah, great, man. Thank you. So I don't know if you were paying attention or you found yourself distracted and getting a cup of coffee as I just went through that little rant. But you, as basically a chief data officer in your own right, that you sell your services and those of your organization on a fractional basis, how does that go? Do you typically find these CAO leaders in place when you get there, or do these tend to be more data-driven projects? Things like, recover technical debt, get to the cloud, build me a data warehouse, those kind of things. How do you reconcile the comments I'm making in your own experience?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Usually coming in from where there's already been a strategy set up, or at least a direction from a CIO or a CDO, typically just at a higher level, or there's just some sort of sense of, hey, we need to go to the cloud. Who do we help us get there? We need to build a warehouse. We need to automate this process. We need to become more efficient and get this data collected. We know we need something, right? A lot of times in that scenario, you're asking some great questions there. The why is what's missing. Why are we doing this? And typically I'm coming more from the bottom up versus the top down. And so
yeah.
I'm asking some of those questions. I'm trying to drive at the why, but at the same time, strategically and project oriented, trying to make sure we're completing the things we're being asked to come in and do. And you mentioned pissing contests. That's something that we end up running into, because if it doesn't come from the top down, like you're mentioning, then we're trying to fight against other people that maybe haven't come on board with whatever those directions are.
Yeah. So do you? In how many cases, maybe this is the way to ask the question, how many cases are you given the opportunity to pop up a level and actually lead a data strategy, right? Because if they're coming at it saying, hey, we need this, we need this widget made, we need this application done, we need this table made, we need this report done, it's very much a tactical level, right? Kind of thing.
Right.
And not that that's bad. I mean, there's plenty of good work to do there. You're obviously building a heck of a business and being in the business of supporting those kind of things. But how often would you say that there's a vacuum and you can pop up a level and help the client lead to a strategic place?
There's a lot of variability there based off of turf wars, as well as the strength of the team or leader that brought us in that space, and what they feel they have the ability to allow us to pop up a level. So sometimes we have those questions. We try to drive towards bringing in the other teams and collaborating and asking the why questions, and getting those other organizations to jump on board and actually think about the big picture project overall, as well as the why. How is this benefiting the business? And just depending on the individuals involved, depends on where you get with that. Typically, we're running at a higher level than, like you mentioned, report by report or things like that. Definitely we'll come in and do those items, but we're trying to drive at the overall architecture of, let's make sure that you have a durable integrated layer that's going to provide you a long-lasting analytics platform. Now, where you get to is depending on where you come into the organization at. And if you can come in at CDO or CAO level, you're going to have a much better opportunity to drive that transformational change.
Yeah, but you're making a very interesting point here, Kevin, and that is the distinction that I'm trying to make between strong data leadership, CDO, you, and strong analytics, business-facing leadership, CAO, me. Right? They're very complementary in the sense that both are required, and so it's one thing when a customer on your side says, "Hey, can you do project 1, project 2, project 3?" That's that has its own merits in terms of its outcome. And I suspect you get measured there based on, okay, did you deliver what they wanted on time, on budget? Those kind of classic measures. But when you talk about data leadership, there's implied governance, there's implied documentation, there's implied scalability, there's implied, am I setting this up for future use where if I add more data sources in the future, if I acquire another company, you're almost at a data level trying to future proof, if that's a corny word, but it's kind of the, that's a massively important strategic leadership thing. So maybe you're understating what you deliver, right? It seems like those kinds of things. So it's not necessarily transformative for a business person, but it is transformative in the sense that you're setting up a data environment to withstand the test of time here.
Yeah, and from a CDO perspective, right? When they think with the word data, well, that's a really large, ambiguous term. What data and what are the functions of the CDO? And that can go, from how we're moving data, are we going to the cloud, or what's the, involving the CISO if you're a large enough company to have a security officer, right? And whether or not you're going to get distracted with legal issues and things like that. There's a whole host of topics that have to be addressed, which if you don't have somebody that is in the role of a CIO looking at just the analytics perspective, what are the metrics? What are we trying to do as far as answering business questions? Because the CDO is going to get distracted by all these other items on his plate that don't address the why that you started with. We're trying to impact the business in the end. That's the real goal, is to be able to allow the business to get the answers they need, to ask questions maybe they couldn't ask before. And once they start getting those questions, they'll think of other questions that they can ask now because they've solved the need that they already had. And that's the important piece, right? That's the true value in all of this. And as you mentioned, the CIO, they're getting distracted with networking and security and infrastructure. As chief data officer is dealing with security as well, and just moving data around, bringing on acquisitions and things like that. And so a role like that, a CAO, is highly important.
Yeah. Well, obviously I agree. It's an interesting take. Let's talk about your business a little bit. You've got to focus on Data Vault as a architecture methodology approach, and you happen to like one of the tools that's out in the market called Warescape that's well suited for those kind of projects. How did you land on those two concepts as a place to focus your business on?
Oh, good question. It's really about focusing on best in class for everything. I mean, having done this work for several decades now, it's really about picking those things that are actually going to succeed in what you're trying to accomplish. So, we're talking about Data Vault 2.0 as a methodology. Pick that up early on because it's really a collection of best practices in how to do data warehousing overall. And I've implemented it, succeeded with it very well in a lot of scenarios. And it really gives you a level playing field for making sure you're bringing in people that understand how to implement and implement well. And it really also focuses on the business. So the CAO role, Data Vault really talks about that a lot without mentioning the CAO role. The point of it is to be business focused and to care about what the business needs and those questions they're asking, and making sure that we're driving towards that, not just having a collection of data out there. That's really just a data swamp of information.
Yeah, again, I think they're complementary, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
ideal scenario is you have a CAO, whether it's on hire, on staff, or it's a fractional one,
Mm-hmm.
that is working closely with the business to make sure that the outcomes are as transformative as possible in terms of what we want to do with data. And then,
Mm-hmm.
okay, how are we going to get it done? Are we going to just make it up as we go? No, maybe the way we should get it done is to use standard best practices, something like Data Vault 2.0. We should use best in class tools that are going to generate code and really accelerate our ability to deliver and
Right.
document this. So it's that's the ideal scenario. I think where it gets interesting and where firms may ultimately just they just underachieve in terms of this left behind concept with analytics is when they're just a little too quick to say, well, we don't really think about the problem in the analytics sense. We just know we need to get value from data, right? It says on the front page of the New York Times, we need value from data, value from data.
Mm-hmm.
So hey, give me one of those, infrastructure data vault thingies, and make sure it works, and make sure all the data is available. And it's the spirit of it. I'm a little mocking in the way I say that, but it's
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
spirit of it is really very sincere. It's very it's an appropriate to some extent. If you don't have strong analytic leadership, I mean that's the next best thing, to at least build the best infrastructure you can. But to me, it's just a shame. You're just leaving something on the table when you could build the best data vault in record time that's
Mm-hmm.
documented till the cows come home, and you don't necessarily still see transformative change when it comes to the power of unleashing that data at an executive business level.
Well, and it's about what is the mark for actually being done with something.
Aye,
So, hey, we built a data vault. Well, that's not really being done. Being done is when you've actually provided the data, the metrics, the answers that the CAO and the executive team can use to make that change to their
yeah,
business. If you're
yeah,
not, you're a lot of times we're setting that bar as far as being complete and checking it off the box and moving on to something else. And we haven't driven that goal far enough into the business.
yeah. Right, right. So another role paradigm almost that's pretty well accepted is what's crudely called staff aug, right? This idea
Mm-hmm.
that I'm going to go get some more horses in the barn, some more tactical talent, and you think of the Indian companies that have been so successful, Cognizant, Tata, Wipro, those guys. But we certainly have a lot here in the U.S. as well. Solemn comes to mind, and they're get me more resources. I'm
Right.
the client. Get me more resources to help me build something faster, better. And it implies that there's leadership at the client itself to go get those resources. And sometimes that assumption is true, and sometimes it's not. And then it
Right.
also makes the assumption, back to the whole theme of this show here, like, why are we doing this, right? So we've gone from the why, which is this sort of CAO role, to the how does this make sense in terms of building out the architecture and building out the plans, and we go
Mm-hmm.
right down to the bone and say, oh no, I need some of those resources. And if you get them from India, of course they're less expensive. At least historically they've been really inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
But where does that leave you? So what? You got some
Right.
inexpensive resources to build some tables, like, so what, right? Do you run into this kind of thing with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as our organization works, it's more we're trying to provide that higher, thought leadership and overall, guidance on architecture and best practice. But the staff aug thing happens all the time. You have people that just hire, they have 100 developers that they just bring in to start building things. And like you said, where's that direction? It's like, hey, we need this thing. It's like saying, hey, I bought this piece of land and I need 50 houses. I'm going to go hire 100 framers, go build
Yeah,
me 50
right.
houses. Well, what are you going to get out of that, right?
Yeah,
And it's definitely not going to be successful, and it's not going to pass inspection.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
that's really I've seen that time and time again. I've come into organizations that have a bunch of people, and the other problem is what does a developer want? Somebody who's brought in as a software engineer, they don't want their work to dry up. They're there to just continue working, and so
Yeah, that's a massive
yeah,
issue, isn't it? Right? You've got almost incompatible objectives at that stage.
right, absolutely. I mean, they don't want the project to end, and it also comes down to what are their goals? Their goals, if there's a new technology that's flashy, whether it's a programming language or a platform, back to the why. Well, I see this all the time where they're pushing to use some particular language, some particular technology or platform, but there's no real meat behind the why they're doing it other than everybody's doing it. Well, that's not a business reason. That's a cost. Like, you're just costing your organization money with no reason behind it. And I think a lot of organizations, I've seen this time and time again, where people are going to the cloud without a real why behind it. And they end up paying so much more money. They don't realize, and guess what? The cloud's not free. And the bills start coming in, and they're just shocked with those bills that come in.
Yeah. So you pay for consumption, and the next thing you know, your consumption's up and you're paying more. And whoa, where did that come from? Right. So unless you really sharpen your pencil and say, do we really need all this data brought in, loaded? Where's the impact? Right. So again, we're back to this sort of fractional CAO value prop here. Like, how do you maximize return? And this, you don't necessarily need. I mean, analytics is not, let's get every piece of data that we can imagine, put it in a jar, shake it up, and it's like a magic trick. Out pops all the answers that we need, right? And Kevin, this is a great segue to the topic I wanted to go through with you as well about AI, right? I think about AI as a step in time and a step in a process where if you cross out the A in AI and you put an H there, right? So human intelligence.
Yeah.
If you can't attack a problem with your own brain, it's very difficult to scale that and make it go faster and richer and better with AI. Again, AI is not some kind of a magic trick, right? So as we look at applying AI into a company's data, if you don't have a sense of the data is right, the data is relevant, the data is of high quality, it's appropriate for whatever the business problems we're trying to solve, and you start working on specific outcomes, specific models for that, and then you say, okay, let me turn machine learning loose, right? So instead of having something that I can get my head around that's got 3 inputs, let's make it 100 inputs. And turn a machine learning algorithm loose on that, right? But that's a very different thing than, hey, just throw an algorithm against my company's data, and somehow magically I'm going to be told what to do. So that's my personal take. I think about the chat bot thing.
Yeah.
Classic use case is the high school kids trying to cheat on their homework, right? So they've been trying to cheat on their homework since the education system has been invented, but in the last 15 years, it's been about using the web, right? So what can I cut and paste, and what can I do to accelerate my ability to cheat on my paper? Well, now that's human intelligence in my metaphor, right? So now you got chatbots that just say, well, just write the damn thing for me, right? I'll just sit back, and now you got the teacher community trying to do AI to catch when the kids are cheating using AI. It's just mind-blowing. So anyway, how do you think about AI as applies to data?
Well, and a little side comment on that too is what I hear and what you're saying there as well, which I hadn't thought about before, is how much waste is occurring in the whole education process right there, right? How much time are teachers spending trying to catch people that are cheating because AI? So is AI helping or hurting in that scenario, right?
Yeah.
And, AI to me, I would, something, very recent that I would tie it back to is streaming data, right? So that was all the rage. And remember, it was everybody's jumping on streaming. You got to get streaming. Everybody needs streaming. And I remember having these conversations, as an organization with you previously, where it's like, well, we need to create streaming support, right? And then you find out, well, actually, companies don't have too many use cases for that, right? Real use cases, the why behind it. Do you need data streaming in from your customer's address changing? Well, no. But, there were some specific scenarios where streaming was important. But same with AI. Why? What are you trying to do? Are you just jumping on it? Is another one of these things where the engineers or the data analysts, they want it on their resume. So, hey, we need to have an AI effort and project and start building this stuff. Well, do you, or are you benefiting the business? What are you generating? What are the answers? What are you going after? You're trying to improve patient outcomes? Are you trying to reduce cost? How are you going about that? And it's kind of similar, like, okay, we spent $10 million. We brought in $10 million of revenue, but we spent $10 million doing that. Well, what did you do? Right? So, it's AI there is some transformative effects there. And I've actually seen that, like with my, 21-year-old son, where he's getting AI to write him all sorts of code to generate things, which is super impressive. Doesn't mean it's 100% correct, but
but in that example, that's very intuitive to me. I mean, because you think about many of the software vendors, the one you use, Wordscape's one of them. There's a whole bunch of them that accelerate the the deployment of code by generating it for you. And there's always the human, you and your people, looking over the shoulder of that code to make sure you like it, make sure it's optimized for the platform that it's on, all of that stuff. Performance tuning, etc. So there's always this sense that the human has to, you're responsible, right? It's not like, well, the code generator did it. It's the same thing with AI. To me, it's just another level of abstraction. And generating code, as long as the human's looking after it at the end, you are the one responsible. That strikes me as just a really good way to accelerate deliverables from data engineers.
Absolutely. The fear is when there isn't that control, that human control around it, because you can generate, and just like with Wordscape, we're generating code much more quickly. It's automating a lot of it, but it's 90% there. And then we look at it and tweak it for whatever your particular scenarios are from there. Same with AI, just running through that, it gets you 90% of the way there. But if you just take that and run with it, you're going to run into all sorts of problems. And that's the real big fear behind all of that, I think.
Well, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, it reminds me of the Wizard of Oz, right? It's the man behind the curtain who's pulling the levers, because there are actually humans behind the AI as well. And they are pulling levers and saying what it can and can't do. And, even from an ethical or moral standpoint too, is the questions that it's allowed to answer or not answer. I mean, my kids, one thing I had them, we typed in for one of the discussion points was, give me some reasons that people should not, teenagers should not be, conscripted into military service. Give me
as a debate item.
Right, as a debate item. And I said, okay, well, let's get the other side of it. And I just put why they should. Why should they not be conscripted? Got a great answer. And we put why should they be conscripted? And it simply said, I can't answer that. That's against the rules of AI.
So that's an example of just when you have a debate issue, one side of the argument is more robust than the other.
But you still, from just a generation aspect with code, there's still people behind there saying what it can and can't use as inputs. To your point earlier, you said we've got two inputs that we're putting into this. And this goes way back. AI really are just algorithms. They're linear algorithms, or there's all sorts of naive Bayes and all sorts of algorithms out there, but it's what you feed them that they can use for inputs. They don't have access to all data and all data points. It's going to be whatever the inputs are is what influences the output.
Yeah, I keep using this phrase, it's not a magic trick, and that's a little pejorative, but it's really true. It's just not, right? I think one of the other threads, and I know you're going to resonate with this, when I talk to clients, it's not only the evolution from human intelligence to more machine learning as as another layer, but why isn't automation in its own right a step towards AI, right? So it's another A word, and you would argue it's a different thing, literally, right? The definitions in the dictionary are not exactly the same. But I view it as along the same continuum, right? So if you're taking something that's very manual and you automate it, and then you automate it on steroids, I mean, the kids cheating on their homework. That's exactly what's happened, right? So I think you can apply that same thing to to the business. And again, I mean, just to wrap up here, Kevin, I think if customers are going to be confused or at least curious about, hey, Kevin, hey, Mark, what's your take on this whole AI thing, right? I think the onus is on us as professionals that are fractional resources here to have good quality answers for these clients that, one, they don't feel like they're being left behind to just ignore it, but That doesn't mean you have to just have chatbot running all over the building to
Right.
tick some box that you're the you're AI literate now, right? I do think it's a journey, and I do think the H version of HI versus AI is not going away. I see that as a massively important step here.
Right. And there's all sorts of security concerns that are out there as well, right? So, you know, such as, and I think it was Samsung, where their employees were putting information in there and they had to, basically ban AI from their whole organization because the rules are you put it in there and that system owns it. So at that point, there's a whole lot of other concerns about what are you providing, and all these organizations and people feeding stuff in, those are inputs that are coming back out. And there's not a decision point from a human intelligence perspective that's controlling that, right? I think AI is excellent at providing known answers that we already know today, just faster. It makes it more accessible to people to, hey, how do what's at least one good way to write an array or this particular program? Boom, here you go. That's going to help people learn very quickly. Doesn't mean it's the perfect or best, but it's going to help learning accelerate. But
you can't automate what you can't understand and do by hand, right? And you can't AI something that you can't already do at some basic level. So I mean, it sounds like you're agreeing with me. There's a continuum of this stuff, and to just put a label on it and say, get me one of those AI thingies is is a little silly. But there are those that are thinking that way. Again, you wouldn't say that out loud if you're a CEO of a company, but you are like, wow, what am I missing? Why don't we have AI around here? And again, I think it's just a matter of slowing down. And back to the theme of this broadcast today, right? It's a matter of getting the right CDO leadership and execution resources like you, who are going to bring best practices to the table for future-proofing their environment. And I think the core idea here that I'm floating is this fractional CAO concept, right? If you want to hire your own CAO, knock yourself out, right? It comes with the risk as articulated by the Sloan article that I went through earlier. But that's certainly an option, right? But it comes with risk. It comes with finding them. It comes with managing them, building out an organization, all of that. You can bring fractional CAOs in just like that. You can hire them tomorrow, and they come with experience. They come with leadership. They come with relationships with people like you. So you do have the data side of the equation buttoned up. I think it's a great thing. And I don't know what you think, but to me, it's a matter of just educating the market, right? I think once people understand, this is like hiring a law firm. I get it, right? That it starts to make some sense.
Yeah, I think people don't realize, I used to work with a hiring organization, and one of the studies that we looked at is that it's costs 2.5 times the amount of a individual salary, under $100,000 a year, the cost for hiring them. So 2.5 times that. If it's $100,000 a year, it costs you $250,000 to hire them. When you get up into the executive levels, you're looking at 10x or more the cost to hire somebody versus what their actual salary is. So when you think about that and you have a short tenure on that position, you're never going to make that money back unless they're incredibly transformative.
Right.
But you're going to really get that out of a fractional officer because their goal is to be in there, create transformation, and get out of there and have a success story for the next organization that they're coming into. And they're not just there trying to protect turf, keep out of legal trouble, etc. So I think it's definitely a people look at the cost and they think, well, that's a lot. But if you really look at hiring, the cost is just extreme in comparison. You're getting a lot more value out of fractional CAO, CDO, just like we're getting out of fractional lawyers and HR firms, et cetera.
Okay, very good. Well, we'll leave it there. So with Kevin Marshbank, I'm Mark Basinski. I hope to see you all in another episode of the Fractional CAO.